Hello and welcome to Archvelder's Hacks with Archvelder and his amazing hacks. This video is all going to be about gold, and with Warlords of Draenor effectively concluded, there's been a renewed focus on gold making as players turn their attention increasingly to the next expansion Legion. Players naturally want to be geared up and dive straight into it. Over the next few months I'm going to be releasing several videos which will greatly increase the amount of gold you can make per hour, whatever you're making currently. The reason these videos will be different and unique from the vast numbers of existing gold guides is that this is an exploit channel, and we in the exploit community are not constrained by artificial rules in the same way that most gold farmers are. Most of these videos will have step-by-step instructions, and I'll show you each stage in-game. For this video, however, I wanted to give a general overview of the subject and give those of you who look to run with my ideas a head start. There are some secrets here that many people would prefer I didn't talk about. Indeed, I do stay away from areas which have the potential to hurt the exploration community in particular. And there are certain secrets I can't mention because it would destroy the opportunities in hours, literally. That said, there are some very valuable secrets I'm going to talk about which made it in and will doubtless piss some people off. Now, I've been looking into gold making strategies seriously in the past few months, and I've read and watched pretty much everything mainstream on it, and a great deal which isn't. There's some very good advice out there. 90% of it is solid and 10% of it is bullshit. The problem is that it is not easy to tell the 10% from 90%. Because of this, I'm not just going to be discussing exploits, but all the issues surrounding gold farming to place the exploit side of things in its proper context. Let's start at the top. The fastest possible way to make gold in Warcraft is through duping. Duping is the art of replicating items within the game, though it is also a term used to extract gold repeatedly from any source, be it quests or some other game mechanic. The subject is treated with almost quasi-mystical reverence. Many people see a rush of high-priced mounts on the auction house and assume a dupe has been found. Others state that they don't exist at all. The truth is somewhere in between. Dupes are very, very difficult for an individual to find. Those who find them have a major incentive to keep quiet, and none really to release the information. When a genuine dupe does leak out, Blizzard fix it often within hours. The number of dupes I have personally verified is in single figures. This is over 7 years of fairly continuous play. The first dupe I verified was discovered by the infamous or famous exploit team Random Acts of Violation. This involved simply wrapping bottles of wine in Dalaran whilst removing them from their original casket. This was originally just a novelty item. The wine materialized and could be vended for a small amount of silver, but was not removed from the original casket, effectively duplicating the items. Clever as this was, and fun as it was to mess about with, it did actually produce very significant quantities of gold without serious automation, as RAOV probably intended, since they sometimes release things to distract from high-level game hacks they keep to themselves. Just a side note here, I discovered interestingly that the RAOV method works to this day, with several items that can't be vended. It is possible there is some obsolete item that can be duped for big money no one has yet thought of. The second dupe was during patch 6.1, when for a brief time pets sent through mail cross servers remained with the sender, but also appeared at the other end. Unlike the wine dupe, this was literally a license to print money. I missed out on this one, but managed to verify its existence from multiple different sources. The third dupe was published on this channel. The Nemesis series of quests obtained at the Gladiator's Sanctum building in the Warlords of Draenor garrison had a breadcrumb crest which could be dropped and retaken repeatedly for a small amount of gold every few seconds. This was worth around 3,000 gold per hour, again requiring automation to make it really profitable. The fourth and fifth dupes were recently released by the exploiter Keizuken. Hope I'm pronouncing that right, mate. Probably the most successful currently active exploiter in Warcraft today. Because Keizuken has his own channel, I am not going to go into great detail about these methods he developed himself. I suggest you subscribe to his channel yourselves and check out the content. To give a very broad overview, the exploits involved duping a certain very valuable Dark Moon Fair item and using a cross-server technique to repeatedly obtain treasures in Pandaria. The last example was extremely controversial and illustrates why you won't generally see dupes published. Exploiters who had apparently been using the technique Kazuken discovered were furious that Kazuken made it available publicly. I sympathised with both parties. All of us with YouTube channels want to put out the best content for our subscribers. That's why we do it. But it must really have sucked for those people making a ton of gold with a method to have it outed. In the end, many players were banned. The single defining characteristic of this and other dupes I've heard of, but not verified, in WoW and in other games is always this. There is some function of the game whereby an instruction is issued twice, when it should have been issued only once. Indeed, this is a major principle of exploiting in general. If you can do something infinitely with no limitations, you can break the game. Now, other than dupes, the primary method of gold making in the game currently is much more mundane. It is simply to do all the flavour of the month tasks that Blizzard is pushing as primary content. At the time this video was released, this is to do garrison missions, the weekly Kazakh for Fellblight, which still sells pretty well, and the shipyard missions, which require oil from Tannan. Because Blizzard wants you to do these things, they will make more money than anything else. If you are listening to this in Legion or later, there will be some equivalent, since Blizzard will always reward the most current content with the highest amount of gold. Now this may seem obvious, but gold farming channels don't generally mention this because it isn't the type of information that draws in viewers. But it is worth bearing in mind that you can make a ton of gold every day just by grinding up alts and using the easiest possible methods of gold making. Next to this, the primary method of gold making is doing old raids. Right now, in the middle of Warlords of Draenor, that means Cataclysm Heroic raids. Already these are being replaced by Mists of Pandaria raids as players' eye-level climbs, a process I would expect to be completed by Legion. There's a great video on this by Death Cruiser Gaming, that's all one word, where he gives a figure of 270,000 gold per week if you farm every Heroic Cata raid on the maximum possible number of alts. I think there's a lot to be said for this type of simple, very grinding-based approach over and above the more exotic methods you see advertised in gold videos. Now, having dealt with the simple stuff, this is where things start to get controversial. There's a constant stream of videos which deal with gold farming spots, which is one of the most heavily searched for terms amongst, well, YouTube videos. These can be broadly summarised as falling into two categories: basic farms and RNG farms. RNG stands for random number generator. Basic farms are farms where a number of items which drop regularly in total produce a decent rate of gold per hour. RNG farms tend to produce more actual profits, but they tend to rely on some average number of rare items dropping within a reasonable time frame. Naturally, the people making RNG videos don't tend to emphasise how wild the fluctuations can be in your profits, and I don't blame them. And these fluctuations can be very extreme. If an item only drops one time in 100, then for the very unlucky it is not impossible for it to drop only one time in 1,000. Over time these numbers should even out, but in the long run, well, the long run could be very long indeed. Which approach you should use is mostly a function of how much farming you intend to do. For the full-time farmer, the results are very likely to even out over time, as the envelope of possibilities collapse. Exactly how long depends, and can be reduced to a formula which I'll publish in a future video. Casual players, by contrast, need more short-term certainty. Now, because there are so many zones in Warcraft, players are largely dependent for their knowledge on how to find decent spots on blogs and YouTubers who tend to publish, quotes, earn N per hour, end quotes, gold videos. Let me start by saying I have no real problem with any other YouTuber. Generally speaking, I've been very impressed with the integrity of the WoW YouTube community. However, the system as it stands is kind of corrupt and it tends to encourage exaggeration. It's a systemic problem rather than the responsibility so much of individuals. Let's take a recent example. There's a guy called Aladar Silmore who recently published a video entitled World of Warcraft 6.2 Gold Farming 120,000 gold per hour in looted item value. Naturally, such a title garnered a very significant number of hits. The video purportedly showed how to farm items from Stone Talon Mountains. This was subsequently very heavily downvoted by Reddit users and subscribers to the very successful YouTuber Asmongold. As Asmongold pointed out in his video looking at YouTube gold farming spots realistically, Sylemore's video stretched credibility to the max. Such a huge influx of gold into the marketplace would surely cause chaos that hadn't materialised, and just on face value the 120,000 number seemed ridiculous. The truth about the video was actually a little more interesting than simple fabrication or exaggeration. Apparently Sylemore had farmed Stone Talon for an hour and then assessed the value of the items, broadly speaking, by taking an average of the sell price of each item across the range of WoW servers. My problem with this type of approach, and it is by no means unique to Sylemore's video, is that it does not take into consideration the time cost of putting the items on the auction house, which is considerable. It would take you months to sell all the items on Sylemore's list. Additionally, you have to keep logging in to put the items up on the auction house when you don't necessarily want to be logging in. So the time cost isn't really the same as it would be if you expended the same amount of labour in a continuous work period. Put simply, the hour spent on farming is going to be a tiny fraction of the total time invested in selling the items. By contrast, consider this strategy, which I believe was very profitable for a period of time, buying up pets sold for low value on some servers, then sending them to aughts on servers with high demand. Using Sylemore's methodology, and that of many other gold farmers, this should provide you with infinite gold per hour. Because they only consider time farming and not time trading, it supposedly would take you no time at all to get your instant profit from this strategy. Obviously this is nonsense. Now, where I felt things went a bit too far was in the demonisation of Sylemore, who in a subsequent video in response to the first provided content full of invaluable information, which was heavily upvoted by his audience. In particular, his explanation of how to use the TSM program and automate a lot of dull bureaucracy for auction house trading was fascinating. And I think this comes again back to the point I originally made, that this type of thing happens, this type of controversy happens because of a systemic problem with YouTube and the nature of clickbait. Events go through a cycle. YouTubers make a video and no one watches it. They make better content, still no one watches it. Then they work out that clickbait titles get hits, and since they're making quality content they figure that can't hurt, and mostly they get away with it, and sometimes they don't. This cycle will continue until everyone stops clicking on clickbait, and I know I do, and that will probably be never. Now I'm going to talk about some of the strategies exploiters use to enhance their early earnings and how this fits in with the general guides I've discussed above. First, from a gold making perspective, if you are truly lucky enough to find a dupe that no one knows about, do that and nothing else. You likely won't find anything. Dupes are, as stated, insanely difficult to find. If you do find one, do not draw attention to yourself and do not draw too much money out of the system at one time. If you dupe large amounts of gold, you will get banned. There will be no warning, it will not be graded as most bans are, your account will simply be gone one day. Second, you want to take all the easy gold from garrison missions or whatever you can. Now this is where things get interesting. When farming, and particularly in instances, you should be looking to get through the whole thing as quickly as possible. Gold farming channels generally do not discuss this, partly because it's obvious, but again because it's not really the type of information that you can market to people. If everyone is farming an instance in 6 minutes and you can do it in 2, you have trebled your profits. A recent example of this is my recent Farm WoW Dungeon Gold 100% Faster video, where I show you how to get through a dungeon in half the time using a little known item from the Gomish Gearworks. Additionally, at the start of Warlords of Draenor, the item Eviana's Feather could be used to bypass entire dungeons or raids. More recently, the item the Throbbing Blood Orb from Talan Jungle accomplished much the same thing. These things tend to occur around about the start of expansions or the introduction of patches, whenever there's a major change taking place in the world of Warcraft. There are many such items which will allow you to increase your speed. Keep your eyes on channels like this one for current exploits. Many of them do not last long, but they can be very profitable while they do exist. These items can also be used in world. They are worthless there because generally you can mount up or fly within the world. But there are exceptions. For example, the Isle of Giants in Pandaria and the Molten Core area in Mount Hajjal have restrictions on flying. Also bear in mind that existing abilities can be used in a creative way to greatly increase your progress through a dungeon. Rogues, who already have a basic ability in burst of speed that allows them to rush through dungeons at an exponential rate, also have an amazing talent which, with a considerable amount of setup and the right macro, can port right through a dungeon in under a minute. I'm going to be making a video about that shortly. Now, there are some things the gold channels generally do not cover because they want to appeal to the most people. Farming is actually very specific to your spec. Some classes simply can't farm certain areas in any realistic time frame without reduced profitability. More importantly, and I'm very surprised this is never discussed, is that farming requires a specific approach in the way that PvE or PvE does. You need a certain type of gear, a certain set of talents, plus an optimized rotation. Within instances, lockouts pose significant barriers to ordinary farmers that don't apply to exploiters. With raids, trash farms are generally limited to trash up to the first boss. If you can find a way to pull trash in subsequent areas, then you have a potentially huge gold farm that no one else has access to. For example, maybe you can glitch your way past some barrier that prevents progress without killing the first boss in a raid. Perhaps a rogue could shadow step past that barrier, or a feral druid can use a similar ability. Perhaps a priest can mind control a mob through a wall to pull trash behind the barrier. Perhaps a death knight can raise his ghoul on the other side of a barrier. Perhaps a hunter or a shaman can use their barrage or flame tongue abilities to pull trash behind that barrier through walls. And I'd better stop there before I give the whole game away of what I'm going to be doing in subsequent videos. I'm going to go into much greater detail in the near future. You probably want to subscribe if you don't want to miss out. Okay, so that's enough for the time being. As I say, if you have any interest in gold farming and talking, you do want to be subscribed to this channel. I hope you found this video interesting and useful, and this has been Archfelder. Take care.